This is Jocko podcast number 234 with Echo Charles and me, Jocko Willink. Good evening, Echo.
Good evening.
So I was working with some echelon front clients the other day, talking about leadership, and I was talking about the minimum use of force. Have you ever heard that phrase before?
Yes, I have.
So we talk about it from sort of a combatives, a tactical perspective, but I was talking about it from a leadership perspective, meaning that you want to lead most of the time with a minimum use of force. So I want to do as little as I can to make you do what I want you to do. That's a good rule of thumb to lead with. I was also thinking, and this is, you might, I don't know if you're going to find this funny. You might. I was thinking about leaders being legit. Have you noticed I use the term legit?
Yes, I use it more now.
You've acquired it.
I've acquired it, yes.
And we know what it means, right? We use the term to mean like that's cool, but it's a little bit stronger, right? Mm-hmm. Means kind of approved. Yeah. But then I was thinking about the source of that word, legitimate, because once again, I was talking about leaders being legit, and actually beyond that, leaders being legitimate leaders. Think about that, right? Mm-hmm. Think about the difference in your mind when you think of a legitimate leader or someone that's an illegitimate leader. There's a huge difference. Mm-hmm. Because when a leader is viewed as illegitimate, then they're not respected, they're not listened to. If someone gets put into a position because they're the boss's favorite or because they backstabbed someone, right, to get that promotion, they're not going to be considered legitimate, a legitimate leader, and that hurts their ability to lead. So as I was thinking about these two things, the minimum use of force and legitimacy, and I recognize both those thoughts in my head from the Counter-Insurgency Manual, FM3 TAC 24. Now, here's a little history behind this manual. When I arrived in Ramadi, this is the manual that I read when I arrived in Ramadi. So what happened was I arrived in Ramadi. I went to an intel briefing. During the intel briefing, there was this massive link diagram of all these bad guys, a bunch of them connected, how they were connected, who they were connected to. Some of the bad guys had little red slashes through them, meant they'd been killed, or a little green slash through them meant they'd been captured. But the thing is, this massive link diagram didn't really look all that much different as the link diagram that I had left in Baghdad 2.5 years prior. So in my mind, I kind of realized, wait a second, if we're still doing the same thing and things don't really look all that different, this isn't good. And well, it seems like we're losing. So I don't know what necessarily thing triggered my brain to go and read the Counter-Insurgency Manual. I must have seen something. I used to read all these, and still do. I'd read, these sort of military websites and, military news and those kind of things. And somewhere in there, I had seen that this new field manual was coming out. And I knew that this new field manual had been written by General Petraeus and General Mattis. Both those guys need no introduction. Both incredible leaders, very, very well known inside the military when I was in, and now both of them are well known outside the military. And that reading this, so I went and Googled it on the regular internet. And so now this is like May of 2006. And I'm trying to remember. I don't think I saw the whole completed manual. I think I saw I think I saw chapters of it, and I did a little research, and it turns out that they had sort of assembled the initial chapters and released them as quick as they could just to get this information out there. And when I read it, it definitely shaped the way I thought about the Battle of Ramadi. It shaped the way that Task Unit Bruiser could operate in the Battle of Ramadi. And really, it ended up shaping the way I think about a lot of different things about leadership and business and the teams and life. And so I actually dug around the internet and I found one of these early versions. So one of the versions that I found of this, it says on it, FM3 Tech 24, and it's June 2006. That's when this is the final draft. So I think the thing I read was probably just a little bit earlier, probably one of the few chapters released. And also, when I read that, I read what I read, and again, I wish I remembered it better. What I read the whole thing. And when you see the whole manual, it's 250 pages, and there's a lot of stuff that gets into stuff that wouldn't have been as pertinent to where I was and what I was doing. So I think I probably saw the first 2 or 3 chapters of this, and I absolutely know for a fact I saw the first chapter, which is what I want to dive into today. Now, this is what made me want to dive into, because believe me, this is one of the first manuals that I wanted to cover. I said, I should cover the Counter-Insurgency field manual. We should go and read that. Well, here's the deal. It is a huge manual, right? And a lot of it digs into the weeds and kind of gets really granular on, how you do logistics inside it. So there's a lot of really deep's not the right word. There's a lot of very tactical techniques that you're going to use to make things happen inside of a counterinsurgency. But what I find fascinating about this is the way that it relates to absolutely everything, especially from a leadership perspective. Because you start thinking about things. You start thinking about the way the world is formulated. Mm-hmm. And if you think about it from an insurgency and a counterinsurgency perspective, you start to see things much clearer. And the reason is because, let's face it, if you want to take a look at things, you want to say, war is comparable to everything, right? Everything is comparable to war. Is it possible to say that? Okay, well, it's possible to say that. But if you don't include insurgency in that and counterinsurgency in that, look, war is not always, especially in business, especially inside of a business, inside of a team. Is it really a war when, I'm trying to get one of my subordinate teams to do what my other subordinate team is doing and they're giving me resistance? Is that war? Is that an all-out war? Not really. It's more like an insurgency. And what I've got to do, I can't just go to war with them. If I go to war with them, I'm going to destroy them. That's the goal of war. Insurgency means I'm going to form relationships. I'm going to bring people on board. I'm going to get rid of the people that are bad actors. Like, it's a totally different, much more nuanced thing. And that's what allows you, when you can look at things through the prism of insurgency and counterinsurgency, it will give you some visibility on how to handle situations. So it's real easy to say, we're at war with our competitor. Okay, I get that. We're at war with our competitor. We're going to go to war with our competitor. We're going to go to war with this other team. But when you say, hey, we've got people inside of our own organization that don't agree with what we're doing, all of a sudden it takes on a totally different meaning. Because if you go to war with them, what do? You destroy them. Can you effectively and perfectly destroy only the things that you want in a war? No. War means there's going to be collateral damage. It means people are going to, it's a gnarly thing. Yeah. So, but insurgency and counterinsurgency is more nuanced. It takes more. You have to use a scalpel instead of using a battle axe, right? That's what you're doing. And so when you start seeing things as an insurgency and acting as if you're utilizing counterinsurgency procedures to try and solve that problem, it's a much more accurate way of saying, hey, everything in life is comparable to war. Okay, is everything in life comparable to war? Maybe, but that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is this allows you to make much better analogies like that. Yeah. I'm not saying there's perfect. I'm not saying everything in life is war. No, this allows you, if there's a war analogy, if there's a war metaphor there, if there's things to be learned from war, you have to learn from the insurgency and counterinsurgency mindset. So let's get into this. And I want to make sure that I kind of point some of this stuff out as we go through. So here's the forward. This manual is designed to fill a doctrinal gap. It's been 20 years since the U.S. Army published a manual devoted to counterinsurgency operations, and 25 since the Marine Corps published its last manual. With our soldiers and Marines fighting insurgents in both Afghanistan and Iraq, it is thus essential that we give them a manual that provides principles and guidelines for counterinsurgency operations, and they call that COIN. Such guidance must be grounded in historical studies. However, it must be informed by contemporary experiences. So what's cool about this is, and they reference the counterinsurgency and the insurgency in Iraq in 2005. Like, that's how up to date this thing was. And they were trying to get this information out there as quick as they could. This manual takes a general approach to COIN. The Army and Marine Corps recognize that every insurgency is contextual and presents its own set of challenges. So guess what? Every little disagreement that you have inside your team has its own little contextual things that are happening in its own set of challenges. So you have to be able to adapt to that. You cannot fight former Saddamists and Islamic extremists the same way you would fight the Viet Cong, the Moros, which is a Philippine let's call insurgent group, or the Tupamaros, which was in Uruguay. The application of principles and fundamentals to deal with each vary considerably. And it goes on to say that nonetheless, there's common characteristics of insurgencies. It says a counterinsurgency campaign is, as described in this manual, a mix of offense, defense, and stability operations conducted along multiple lines of operations. So that right there, if you take that little thing right there into your mindset, because if we just say we're going to war, what does that mean? It means optimally, we're just going on offense. Maybe we say we're going to go offense, but we're going to have to go on defense sometimes. But then stability, like, what does that mean? That means you're trying to keep this whole organization together. Right? You're not worried about this. When I'm going to total war with Echo's country, I'm not worried about stability for you. I'm worried about just destroying you. I'm going on offense. Yeah. And then conducted along multiple lines of operations. So that means there's it's not just fighting. It's not just guns. It requires soldiers and Marines to deploy a mix of both familiar combat tasks and skills, more often associated with non-military agencies, with balance between them depending on the local situation. This is not easy. Leaders at all levels must adjust their approach constantly, ensuring that their elements are ready each day to be greeted with a handshake or a hand grenade. What does that do to your mentality? I mean, just think you're going into a meeting. You got to be ready to deal with a handshake or a hand grenade. That's what you got to be ready for. To take on missions only infrequently practiced until recent years at our combat training centers, to be our nation builders as well as warriors, to help reestablish institutions and local security forces, to assist in the rebuilding of infrastructure and basic services, and to facilitate the establishment of local governance and rule of law. That's what you throw the military into, all that stuff. That's why counterinsurgency is so hard. Yeah, just everything I just said. Going to war is like the easy part. Here's the bad guys, go kill them. That's the easy part. Everything else I just said, that's what makes this so complicated. Conducting a successful counterinsurgency campaign thus requires a flexible, adaptive force led by agile, well-informed, culturally astute leaders. Probably the opposite of what the stereotypical military person is. It is our hope that this manual provides the necessary guidelines to succeed in such a campaign in operations that inevitably are exceedingly difficult and complex. Our soldiers and Marines deserve nothing less. And it's signed David H. Petraeus, Lieutenant General, U.S. Army, and James N. Mattis, Lieutenant General, United States Marine Corps. So there's your introduction. Right out of the gate, you can see we're dealing with something totally different, just infinitely more complex. Chapter 1, and this is the only chapter we're going to cover today. And it may be look, like I said, it gets into some very granular stuff, but this is such a good opening. Chapter 1, Insurgency and Counterinsurgency. Counterinsurgency is not just thinking man's warfare. It's the graduate level of war. Special Forces officer in Iraq, 2005. And this is what's really cool about this is the Battle of Ramadi is seen as a model of counterinsurgency. And I was lucky enough to be there and lucky enough to sit in brigade op orders and division op orders and to sit with the brigade commander and listen to what his thoughts were and hear what the input was and hear. I mean, it just was, I was so lucky to be a part of this, to be there. So starts off overview. Insurgency and counterinsurgency are subsets of war. Though globalization and technology and technological advancement have influenced contemporary conflict, the nature of war in the 21st century is the same as it has been since ancient times, a violent clash of interest between or among organized groups characterized by use of military force. Success in war still depends on a group's ability to mobilize support for its political interests and generate sufficient violence to achieve political consequences. Means to achieve these goals are not limited to regular armies employed by a nation state. At its core, war is a violent struggle between hostile, independent, and irreconcilable wills attempting to impose their desires on another. It is a complex interaction between human beings and is played out in a continuous process of action, reaction, and adaptation. War. This manual is available for free on the interwebs. Google it. I'm not going to read the whole thing today. I'm going to hit some highlights. Says this also, its scale and complexity should never, this is talking about counterinsurgency, its scale and complexity should never be underestimated by leaders and planners. Indeed, the possible scale and complexity must be understood before the beginning of any such operation. This is a mistake we've seemed to make over and over again. You think you're the big, badass American military. We're going to go in there. We're going to squash these enemy soldiers, and the peasants will be on board. You know, the local populace will be on board when they see the freedom. And we just underestimate this thing all day long. You underestimate how hard it is to do this, how hard it is to actually execute a counterinsurgency. It talks about a couple different aspects of insurgency, a couple different kinds. A revolution, which they describe as an unplanned, spontaneous explosion of popular will. Another one is a coup d'etat, which is a small group of plotters that replace state leaders with little support from the people at large. And an insurgency is an organized, protracted politico-military struggle designed to weaken government control. Insurgencies normally seek to either overthrow existing social order and relocate power within the country. It talks about internal wars. As the name internal wars implies, these are primarily conflicts within states, not conflicts between states, and they all contain at least some element of civil war. That's why I think so much of this is pertinent to being a leader, because so much of being a leader isn't about how you're taking the fight to the enemy. It's how you're handling the people inside your own country. That's what's hard. Handling the people inside your own company, handling the people inside your own organization. Let me tell you something. At Echelon Front, where we do leadership consulting, we spend at least as much time helping solve the problems inside the company as we do helping companies figure out how to solve what they do to beat their competitors. Because if you don't have a squared away, organized situation inside your team, you're not going to beat the competitors. You're not going to defeat your enemy. So this counterinsurgency, these counterinsurgent tactics are what you use to help your own team stay unified. And if you don't utilize them correctly, guess what you get? You get an insurgency. And at worst, it rips your team apart. But even if it doesn't rip your team apart, it has you rowing in different directions. And when you row in different directions, you don't go where you're supposed to go. So you need to keep a check on that. One possible exception to this rule involves what can be termed a liberation insurgency, where indigenous elements seek to expel or overthrow what they perceive to be a foreign occupational government. Such a resistance movement could be mounted by a legitimate government in exile, as well as elements competing for that role. Well, another thing that happens in business, businesses get bought. Businesses get bought by bigger businesses. Businesses have people get inside and take over. There's hostile takeovers. There's all these kind of situations. And then you get these little insurgencies inside companies, inside businesses, inside teams. Also, it can be outside actors get involved. Fast forward, in all cases, the long-term objective for all sides remains acceptance of the legitimacy of one side's claim to political power by the people, state, or region. So if you're a leader and you are in a company and you're not considered legitimate, you're basically out of the gate. You're probably going to be dealing with an insurgency.
Yeah,
that's just how it's happening. It's going to be rough. Another little section here. The scale and complexity of coin should never be underestimated. The effort requires a firm political will and extreme patience on the part of the government, its people, and countries providing its support. Widespread security requirements also limit flexibility, again, ceding the initiative to insurgents. There's all kinds of reasons that the insurgents have an advantage. Right. Oh, another quote here. The contest of internal war is not fair, as most of the rules favor the insurgents. Most of the rules favor the insurgents. Iraq, they absolutely did. Did the insurgents in Iraq care if they wounded friendly civilians? Not one bit. Did they care if they killed each other? Not one bit. Did they use torture? Absolutely. Did they use terror? Absolutely. Did they do the most brutal and savage things to the local populace? Yes, they absolutely did. And they didn't care at all. So they have a complete advantage when it comes to the rules. And whether you're talking about the tactical rules or the actual rules of engagement or the law of armed conflict, they don't care about any of that. Yeah. The insurgent can make exorbitant promises and point out governmental shortcomings caused by the insurgency. So you make a mistake fighting an insurgency, they're going to use it to their advantage. You kill civilians by accident, that's going to be national news, world news, global news. They're going to take advantage of that. They want that to happen. Fast forward, coin is not an approach to war that can be classified simply as foreign internal defense. It features a full spectrum of operations, including stability operations like any other campaign. In all cases, however, insurgencies will not be defeated simply by killing insurgents. Since the insurgent begins with strategic initiative, meaning they have an advantage, the counterinsurgent is usually involved initially in more defensive than offensive operations. That's the way it kind of kicks off. They're attacking you. You don't even know who they are. Victory cannot be gained until the people accept the legitimacy of the government mounting coin and stop actively and passively supporting the insurgents. That right there, I was smiling when I read this because that's one of the quotes that I just completely ripped off from this when I read it for the first time, and I started using that all the time. I started saying, when my boss would ask me, what are you guys trying to get done? I'm like, sir, we're trying to stop the passive support that's happening for the insurgents. And all of a sudden I sounded smart. Stole words from them. Because that's what there was a lot of in Ramadi. In Ramadi, there was the local populace was so scared that if an insurgent came into their house and wanted to use their window to shoot their sniper rifle from, they would just get out of their way, give them some bread. We don't want to bother you. You do what you got to do. We're not here to cause you, but they provided passive support. Yeah. And that happens inside companies too. You get the whatever, that one element that used to be here, they're going to help you. They're going to give you a hand. They're definitely not going to rat you out because they see that illegitimate leader that stepped in.
They just want to keep their job a lot of the time.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. They don't want to make any waves,
right? They don't want to make waves.
This gives a good section that kind of talks about the histories of insurgencies. That's why it's worth pulling out this book. Each insurgency is unique, although there may be similarities among them. In all cases, the insurgent's aim is to force political change. And this is important. I was trying to read my note here. Force political change, but actually sometimes, especially in business, the goal is to prevent change, right? They don't want some new system. They don't want some new procedure. So they have a little insurgency to fight against. They're fighting against change. Specific types of insurgency. Here's some things that you're supposed to try and figure out. What's the root cause of the insurgency? How important is that, right? If you're in a team and you're in a business, you're in a leadership position, and there's some kind of an insurgency happening, you feel that. Find out what the root of it is. Where is this coming from? Next, extent to which it enjoys support, both internally and externally. Who's on board with this? Bases on which insurgents appeal to target population. Insurgents' motivation and depth of commitment. Where are they at? Like, how much does this mean to them? Likely insurgent weapons and tactics, operational environment, which insurgents seek to initiate and develop their campaign. So there's some things to look at. And this is why I think this is important, because if you just look at your own team and you just think, oh, they're against me, I'm at war with them, it's a problem. The way you fight that war is not going to be correct. If you look at it as an insurgency, you say, okay, how do I actually assess this? And this gives you such a strategic advantage. Several different types of insurgents. Some of them seek to completely change the existing political system. Anarchists, egalitarians, traditionalists, pluralists. They got good little definitions for all these in there. Some do not seek total political power in a state. These are secessionists, reformists, preventionists, commercialists. And you got to try and figure out what it is that your insurgents are seeking. Insurgent strategies, you've got conspiratorial. Conspiratorial strategy involves a few leaders and a militant cadre or activist party seizing control of government structures or exploiting a revolutionary situation. This is what's interesting. Such insurgents remain secretive as long as possible, emerging only when success can be quickly achieved. That's definitely something to think about, because you think everything's going cool, right? You hear a little bit of murmur here, a murmur there. Someone's talking about this method that we're using. Someone's against some way, some change that we want to make. You hear little whispers. And then all of a sudden one day, boom, you get hit in the face with it. And you weren't ready for it. So you got to watch out for that. Military focus. These are ones that are going to use military force to try and make things happen. Urban organizations like the Irish Republican Army and Latin American groups have pursued an urban warfare strategy. Approach uses terrorist tactics in cities to sow disorder and create government repression. Though such activities have not generated much success without wider rural support. You also got the protracted popular war. God, it's just an ugly term. Protracted war. What does that mean? It's going to last a long, long time. And what sucks is, from a psychological standpoint, like if you and I are going to train jiu-jitsu, and you know that I'm just a guy that's just going to go protracted war. Like, you don't want none of that, right?
No, I tend not to.
Hey, well, let's say you set up the clock, the timer, and you put 5-minute rounds on there, and then I walk over and I just turn it off. There's no time limit. It's just going to be a protracted war. We're going, and I don't care how long it takes.
Yeah.
I was thinking of doing is there a jiu-jitsu tournament right now that's no time limit, submission only? Does one exist right now?
I don't know.
We've had some variations of it attempted.
Yeah.
But is there anyone that's doing no time limit,
No,
submission only.
I think there's certain ones that have like those types of matches, but I think they're specific, like special matches, like no time limit matches or something like that. Not all of them, but it's pretty rare. But yes, I've seen that.
What if we do a jiu-jitsu tournament called Protracted War?
Yeah, sure.
The thing is, you got to be ready.
You got to be ready for.
Think about this as a competitor. You're like, I got to hydrate because I might be fighting for the next 9 hours.
Well, that's what the UFC was. Protracted.
Yeah, it was the first ones were what? How many before they made time limits?
15-minute time limit with like a overtime or so. It was 1 and 2, I think, and 3,
something like that.
Yeah.
So you'd have to do this. I had an idea. You do. Because you got to figure most matches aren't going to last like 9 hours.
Yeah.
Very few matches would last 9 hours. I think very few matches would go over an hour, but occasionally you would get two just really evenly matched humans. And you know how hard it is to submit somebody that's good.
Yeah.
But if you had 3 mats running at the same time, and they were all had a no time limit, protracted war on each one of them. So that way, if you have an audience that wants to see this, they can watch whichever one is happening. Because let's face it, some of them is going to get, the guy's going to get a position and he's just going to start grinding somebody down, but it might take 2 hours.
Yeah.
I mean, if I was going against you in this tournament and I got a cross side, it would be a long time.
Yeah.
I would be there for a long time.
Yeah.
I wouldn't rush it.
Right.
I would cook you for a while.
Sure. Yeah.
Why would I rush?
Yeah, no reason. And I think that was the whole thing about jiu-jitsu to begin with, like how Helio Gracie's, smaller guy, and he lets he can put himself in safe positions, positioning, minimize damage, all this stuff, and then the guy gets all tired, and then he can use his leverage or whatever. Like there was a lot of them. His matches, old school, over 1 hour.
Yeah.
When they had no time limit. But you got to be ready for that, as a competitor. But as far as tournaments go, as an audience member too, you got to be ready for that.
Yeah, well, that's why maybe you're doing it with multiple matches going on at the same time, and that way you can you can kind of highlight the match where there's action happening.
I watched I don't think it was no time limit, but it was one of those ones that I think it was like a 30-minute time limit. It was like a super fight at one of the early tournaments that I did, and they were super good. They're both really good, so they're even. And like none of them even scored a point on each other. And after a while, I was like, bro, this is I like jiu-jitsu a lot, but it's kind of boring, bro.
Yeah, that's the, what the problem is there? The time limit. The time limit. Because when you have a time limit, you're like, oh, well, I was training yesterday. I was like, there was something like 40 seconds left. I could see it on the clock. And I was rolling with Andy, and I was like fighting to keep him in, from passing my guard. And then, there was like 32 seconds left. And I was like, hey man, even if he passes my guard right now, chances are he's not going to finish me. Yeah. So I'm not saying I let him pass, because he definitely passed it, but
yeah, you don't gotta.
I kind of then lock my hands, and I kind of sat there, and I'm like, and he knows it. Yeah, he knows it. He's laughing. He's like smiling or whatever. He's like, yeah. So that's in your head.
Yeah.
So when you're in these things and you have a time limit, you're like, whatever. I can hang out for another 7 minutes.
Yeah.
Not just don't expose anything. But if there's no time limit,
it's a different
mentality. So when you're going into those protracted wars, if you're the insurgent, bro, you live there.
Yeah.
You live there.
It's your life now.
So you don't care how long. When we fought Vietnam, when we fought in Vietnam, the Vietnamese, they're not going anywhere. They're at home.
Right.
We have to go over there. When we're fighting in Iraq, they're at home. The insurgents are there. They live there. There was foreign fighters, of course, but Afghanistan, same thing. So they have this weapon on their side, which is time, the protracted war.
Yeah. This is going to sound kind of off, but I was watching this. It was like it wasn't a documentary, but the kind where it's like on like Discovery or one of these, and then they propose, like, what if this happened? How, you know, like there's a show called What If Humans Disappeared or something like that. You ever heard of that? Where it's
Not
like,
really.
okay, after, 10 years, the cities would start to get overgrown.
Cool,
and after, and they have the CGI, and it's pretty cool. So there was one where it said, what if aliens took over?
Mm-hmm.
And how would we beat them? Because if aliens took over, that's what they would be. They wouldn't be like, oh, let me just come and live with you guys. That's what they're saying. Chances are
they're not benevolent.
Yeah, not to help people. They're here for Earth,
Okay.
It's kind of like, I mean, think about it. That's every living thing. It's kind of like, bro, I live here now kind of thing. Like, we gotta. So anyway, they're saying, how would we fight the aliens? And they're breaking it down. Like, this is what the aliens would do first. This is what they do second. This is what they do third. They're just totally breaking it down. I was like, dang. But they're saying at the end of the day, the best way we could win is through, I think they called it guerrilla warfare, or maybe insurgency. I forget what they called it.
Both.
But that's what they would say. It's like, we live here, so we have that advantage of, like, we can hide for months and then attack and then go hide again, because we live here. Meanwhile, they're here. So it's like,
they're here. They got to run supplies from their own whatever alien spaceship.
Yeah, and they got to make moves, and they got to
dragged me into a protracted conversation about alien invasions. I'm losing this war over here.
But it's the exact metaphor, though. Like, where if, like, aliens are coming over, whether it be to take over or to get some alien job done, bro, we live here. We don't, we can take hits. We're still living here.
This is the thing that's ridiculous about this argument, is what level of competence do the aliens have?
We'll say varying levels of competence.
Okay, so if let's face it, we could get invaded by aliens that were not that advanced, and we would just kick their ass real quick.
Like on District 9 or something like that?
I don't know, but I'm not familiar. Where did that battle take place?
South Africa.
Who were the insurgents?
Aliens. Oh, no, the insurgents were, I guess that's not really an insurgent situation. Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. I thought you were talking about an actual wartime situation that I was unaware of.
Oh, yeah, the aliens came down? Yeah, I don't know. But, yeah, on that movie. Yeah, I guess, District 9 was not about any kind of insurgency at all. It was more that show.
What was their competence? What was their competence level?
The aliens?
Yeah.
Basically, it was like aliens. I don't know. I forget why they were there. No one really knew why they were there. But it's essentially the ship. It didn't crash, but it sort of got jammed up. And they were sort of stuck there. Okay. So they find after a few months or a month or whatever, the human people went up and with their helicopters, because the alien ship kind of didn't crash, just hovered and stayed there. Didn't open, did nothing. So they go up and they explore. They open the alien craft. It's pretty good show. Anyway, they open it and all the aliens are all starving and freaking, they're messed up. Like they're desolate,
Got it.
And so they're like, hey, well, they're not hostile, so what do we do? Just leave them, so they set up these camps for them, to help them or whatever.
So the aliens were kind of quarantined. They had a lack of food. So they kind of shuffle supplies, but bro, they're sort of aliens, like, I don't know, what do you do? You can't just let them live with us because they're kind of whatever. So it's kind of that situation. So it was less about fighting them. It was less about that. It was more about some other issue. Yeah, and I guess you'd have to figure that if an alien element made it here, they're pretty advanced. Yeah. They got some technology. So I don't think we're going to be coming up against the JV team.
No,
right?
That's what that show was saying.
The JV team isn't going to show up on Earth.
No.
Right? Because how did they get here? They designed some kind of a spaceship that got here. These are some Elon Musk level smart people.
Well, then again, technically, sure, but does that indicate, or does that prove that they're going to be squared away in all ways? Maybe they just have this new technology, they can do this stuff, but does that
if you
mean
can
that
make a spaceship that can get here, I mean, you had to fight to get here. This was not easy.
Yeah, but that's a different kind of fight when you think about it. Yeah. See what I'm saying? It's kind of like,
oh, maybe they're just people that imagine if they just didn't even have the concept of violence, right?
Yeah,
like it just was
war.
It just was totally foreign to them.
Yeah,
and so they could show up here, and the first one that tries to do something, somebody just hits him in the head with a bat.
Yeah, no,
and they're just all shocked.
Oh yeah, all confused and what? Yeah.
But is that even possible that there's a group that just has no comprehension of violence?
If there is, you know what they'd be? They'd be aliens because you see what I'm saying, things work different. You see what I'm saying? So you know how like every once in a while like you'll get a situation where I don't know.
This turned into a grounded podcast real quick.
I'm thinking of something real like ambiguous actually right now. But let's say you're the alien. You go to a distant planet and you're like, we're gonna take over. So we're gonna bring this poison. This poison is like the most lethal poison ever created here. So we're gonna take this and we're just gonna exterminate them all. Like that's how. So we're gonna go, and then you go to this distant galaxy. You go to their planet, whatever. Perfect for perfect, just like Earth, whatever. And you start spraying this poison,
and they're licking it up.
Yeah, they're like, oh my gosh, it solves like a bunch of their problems and makes them super. It's like that kind of situation. I'm just saying it doesn't prove that just because they know how to travel through dimensions or whatever, it doesn't mean they're going to be successful in everything. You see what I'm saying? It could be the opposite.
Right on. All right. Well, protracted war. That's where we were at.
Yes, sir.
Mao's theory of protracted war outlines three-phased politico-military approach. Strategic defensive. This is where the enemy, and in this case you're flip-flopping back and forth on who's the enemy, but the enemy, meaning the government, has stronger forces, so you're in defense. Then stalemate, where you're doing guerrilla operations. And then offensive is when you actually have beat down the government forces enough that you can actually have a real war with them, almost like a conventional war. And then it talks about how you can go these stages. You can go through one stage, you can skip a stage, you can come back to the stage. So that's what happens with protracted war. It's very hard to, speaking of protracted war, it's very hard to get the submission on the insurgents, because every time you get them in a chokehold, they slip out and they slip away, right? Yeah. And now you can't go and find them because they slip back in with the local populace. So you've got to kind of, check for that. So that's protracted popular war. They got traditional. Many contemporary insurgencies fit a more traditional approach based on clan, tribe, or ethnic group. Such insurgency typically has an entire community join the effort as a whole, bringing with them their existing social and military hierarchy. The primary struggle in an internal war is to mobilize people in a battle for legitimacy. And I think that word legitimacy and legit is the thing that made me start thinking maybe I should do the Counter-Insurgency manual. Because think about how often that happens in an organization. The leader is either legitimate or not. And if you're not considered legitimate, everything is hard. Yeah. And if people think you're legitimate, everything is that much easier. So when you are acting as a leader and you do things that negate or detract from your legitimacy, you're doing a whole lot more damage than you think you are. Yeah. Every time you use your authority in an abusive way, your legitimacy goes down. Every time you tell a lie, your legitimacy goes down. Every time you do the right thing, your legitimacy goes up.
Yeah, I feel like, when people will say, I demand respect, that thing.
You automatically just lost respect.
Yeah, kind of, right?
Yeah.
Where it's because it's not really how.
And by the way, you don't even have to say that. You can just act like that. Yeah. Just act like you demand respect.
Yeah, like call me sir. Yeah. Damn it, kind of thing. I'm not saying there's anything wrong calling someone sir or whatever, but that kind of stuff. Like they'll harp on that kind of stuff. Like you can tell someone's reaction when they're reacting to this detail where it's like, oh, bro, you're like I see what you're doing right now. You're basically saying like I demand respect. I'm not gonna. Me earning it, that's a whole different thing. You see what I'm saying? But you just better give it to me, kind of thing. So it's like one of those, if you're illegitimate, that tends to be like what it looks like. If you're legitimate, it tends to not be what it looks like.
It's just a good little framework to think of, to filter your actions through. Yeah. Does this make me more or less legitimate? Yeah. Mobilization means there are 5 means to mobilize popular support: persuasion, coercion, reaction to abuses, foreign support, apolitical motivations. A mixture of them may motivate any one individual. So persuasion, Political social security and economic benefits entice people to support one side or the other. This is where you're like, hey, we're going to take care of you. Coercion. This is the carrot and the stick, right? Persuasion is the carrot. Coercion is the stick. You either get on board with what we're doing or we're going to give you a beat down. Reaction to abuses. This one is important. A government that abuses its people or is tyrannical generates resistance to its rule. Think about that from a leadership perspective. Think about all those three things from a leadership perspective. You can either use persuasion, you can use carrot, stick, and then reaction to abuses. So if you abuse people as a leader, they're going to have been injured, maltreated, victimized, dishonored, or had close friends or relative killed by the government, particularly by security forces, may lash back at their attackers. So when you're abusive to people, it's going to come back at you. It adds fuel to the insurgency.
So you're saying the insurgency will use that?
Oh, yeah.
That's in the other tactic?
That's how you get people to come on board. If I show up at your house and I was like, hey, Echo, I was real sorry to hear about your brother.
Yeah, guys.
I'm really sorry to hear about your brother. I can't believe that they did that to you.
Yeah.
I can't believe the government security forces did that to your brother. Yeah. Do you want to fight back?
Yeah.
Here's what we're doing. Yeah. You see where I'm going with this?
Totally.
So what does that mean? That means that when you're fighting an insurgency, you can't add fuel to that fire. You have to be very careful in how you act towards the populace, because the insurgents will utilize your abusive actions to bolster their cause. Foreign support, obviously you can have people on the outside that like to see that want to support some insurgent inside of a country. Apolitical motivations. Here's criminals, mercenaries, people attracted by the holy warrior's romantic status, and others whose self-images of being a warrior and a fighter for a cause might also join an insurgency. I think you saw a lot of that in ISIS. People that were just criminals and just wanted to go get crime on.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't like they were promising a whole bunch of nice stuff in the Islamic State.
Yeah. Well,
other than authorized rape of, women, children, girls, and boys.
There was, I'm not going to say how I saw this, but I saw some ISIS promo videos. Mm-hmm. Like promo. I don't know that they were recruiting videos.
Oh, no.
I've seen some of those too. But it was like a promo, like an advertisement for this cool club kind of thing. Yeah. I was like, dang it.
Oh, wait. Were they ones that were insanely violent?
No.
Oh, so they were just kind of real positive?
Yeah. And it would show they were there was a whole bunch of them. And yes, they're the insanely violent one that were kind of produced a little bit. Yeah. That was kind of odd. It was weird. Because I don't know who they were marketing to. I mean, I couldn't relate to the audience that they were marketing to. We'll say that. But yeah, the other one, the nice one, was odd because of what everything else they've been putting out. Then it was almost like this utopian commercial.
Yeah, that's a crazy world of, I guess, social media. Yeah. Have you heard my new term for the social media?
Yes.
Emotional media. Yeah. It's not only for social media. It's actually all media.
Yeah.
Because every media right now is just emotional media. Yeah. How can we make everyone hyper emotional? Yeah. What story can we show to make everyone freak out? Let's do that. What video can I tweet or share on the gram to make people get super crazy?
Oh, yeah.
Let's do that.
Yeah, which one can people retweet? Yeah. That's a big one where they'd be like, okay, this is super retweetable. Because you're going to get all fired up, and then you're going to say something along the lines in your head. You can say something along the lines of can you believe this guy said this? Boom, retweet. Everyone who agrees with you, boom, they're going to feel the same way. Hopefully retweet too.
It's also actually some people that weren't really thinking about it see that and they go, wait.
Yeah. What? Yeah. Oh, yeah.
They get emotional.
Yeah.
And then you get a whole millions of people.
Yeah.
Next little sections is about causes. A cause is a principle or movement militantly defended or supported. Insurgents may create artificial contradictions using propaganda and misinformation. Insurgents have much to gain by not limiting themselves to a single cause. Insurgents employ deep-seated strategic causes as well as temporary local causes, adding or deleting them as circumstances demand. So you get this sort of whatever your problem is with the government. Like if you're an insurgent in Iraq, not only do they say, well, in Iraq it was, the Baathists have been in charge forever, and not only that, but we don't have. Whatever, we don't sell our oil. We don't get enough money for our oil. Whatever grievance you have becomes part of something that we adopt.
Yeah.
And that can happen inside any team, right? What starts off as, if you're mad, I'm mad because we're using a new method, and you're mad because we didn't get a pay raise. Guess what? Now we're both. I'm mad about both now.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to adopt. You're damn right. We need more money.
Yeah.
And that's how the insurgencies grow. They start adopting all these different problems, all these different causes, unify them into one giant cause.
Yeah, so it solidifies the enemy. That's the enemy versus us.
Any country ruled by a small group without broad popular participation provides a political cause for insurgents. Exploited or repressed social groups by the entire class, be they entire classes, ethnic groups, or small elites, may support larger causes in reaction to their own or narrower grievances. So again, as a leader, when you're looking at your team, internal, see that you might be getting multiple causes turned against you. Next section's about mobilizing resources. And obviously insurgents, resort to tactics such as guerrilla warfare and terrorism, not only because of their disadvantages in manpower or organization, but also because they usually begin with limited or inadequate resources compared to the counterinsurgent. So that's why you end up with guerrilla warfare, asymmetrical warfare. They talk about money. They talk about insurgency and crime. Sustainment requirements often drive insurgents into relationships with organized crime or into criminal activities themselves. This is absolutely true. I know the Iraqis had all kinds of crime going on, or the insurgents had all kinds of crime going on, smuggling and black markets and the whole nine yards to try and pay for what they were doing. And then, in Afghanistan, they got this massive drug trade to support the insurgency. So that's definitely something that can be problematic. Elements of insurgency: leaders, combatants, political cadre, auxiliaries, and mass base. Leaders control the insurgent movement. They are the idea people and the planners. They usually exercise leadership through force of personality, the power of revolutionary ideas. Isn't that interesting? The power of revolutionary ideas. Isn't it kind of interesting? Like you always hear me talk about how I was a rebellious kid, and I was rebellious in my Navy career, without a doubt. I was rebellious. I always have that kind of rebellious thing. But the idea that the power of revolutionary ideas, there's like a natural human there's a natural human draw to that. Mm-hmm. And you know what? My best example of that, which you, my friend, will give me a full salute and credit for.
Dude, right.
You know what it is? What is the insurgency that you think of that everyone is drawn to and everyone supports?
Insurgency that everyone draws.
Just about every human being supports one particular insurgency.
I don't know. Individual responsibility,
no.
I guess. What?
Star Wars.
Star Wars, what? The show? The movie?
Yeah, the movie. Who are what's the name of the rebels?
Yeah.
Right? They're revolutionary. That's what's happening.
Yeah.
Why do these revolutionaries, why does Che Guevara, have this t-shirt that everyone, because he's a revolutionary.
Sure.
Right? People like that.
Yeah.
Is just some weird, I guess it's can be kind of like rooting for the underdog.
Yeah.
Maybe there's some kind of attraction to that.
Yeah.
That just naturally exists. That's why when we watch Star Wars, No one says, "Hey, I hope the Empire wins." Right? There's no one saying that.
Even the name, the Empire. I see what's going on there.
I mean, that it's the American Revolution, right? The revolutionary ideas.
Yeah.
People like that kind of thing.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah. I mean, that's a common
story.
story.
I guess as I'm thinking through it psychologically. You know what you like about it? You know what's naturally attractive about it? You take all your grievances in life, right? If I don't make enough money. I didn't end up where I wanted to end up. My girlfriend dumped me. My boyfriend dumped me. I don't like my house. I don't like my car. I don't like my apartment. Whatever grievances you have, you can package all those things up and you can point a finger at them and you can say, those things are all wrong. I'm being revolutionary over here.
Yeah. Yeah, and you identify with that. I mean, back to the movie thing where you identify with that person.
I opened up a door.
Nah, you're the one who said Star Wars. You're the one who says. So you think?
What are they called? Just the rebellion? What are they called? The rebels.
The rebels, rebel base. The rebellion in the Senate. And
rebellion. You support them. They're the underdog
versus the Empire. Yeah, but that's most. That I don't want to say most movies because I haven't seen most movies, but. That's a lot of movies, the underdog. Bro,
For sure.
It kind of, to be honest, it seems like all of them. Like, bro, Karate Kid, freaking Rudy. I don't know. Name Rambo. I don't know.
Yeah.
Whatever movies you watch or whatever.
Yeah, the underdog.
Yeah.
So those are the leaders. They're going to capitalize on the power of revolutionary ideas. Isn't it? Even in marketing, right? Even in marketing, people are like, this is a revolutionary new pair of sneakers or phone or whatever, right? Yeah. Everyone is attracted to that idea.
Well, remember on Rambo First Blood Part 2, that time where he was hiding in the wall.
Oh yeah.
It wasn't the wall, it was the mud. It was the mud wall essentially in Vietnam or whatever. And like he opened his eyes, you could only see his eye, and then he like undoes his fingers first, then he comes out and kills everybody. That at the time was a revolutionary idea. Like, oh, he hid in the mud right there. That was kind of dope the way he did it. You see what I'm saying,
bro? I think you just nailed it.
But
I think
true.
You just captured it all. Man. I think you just captured it all,
more or less. Yeah.
Combatants do the actual fighting and provide security. There's the political cadre. The cadre is the political core of the insurgency. They're actively engaged in the struggle to accomplish the insurgent goals. Auxiliaries are active sympathizers who provide important support services. And then you get the mass base, and these are followers of the insurgent movement supporting the populace. And again, so inside your organization, inside your team, you can identify who these people are when there's an insurgency going on, right? There's the leaders of it that are kind of, guess they have this advantage of they're standing up to the man, right? They're revolutionary. So they got a little advantage there. Yeah. There's combatants that are actually going to try and make things happen. There's this cadre that's out there kind of, running their mouths and sowing seeds of discontent. There's sympathizers and the mass base. So if you can identify who these people are, you can realize what you need to do to disrupt this insurgency from happening. And isn't it weird that as we talk about this, I just had this instinct right now, even in my own head, just right now as we're having this conversation, even I sympathize with the insurgents. In like talking, I'm thinking about, I got this new idea and the man and all that stuff. Yeah. That's real. Yeah, that's real stuff that you feel. Yeah. Maybe you think it's because we're American, or is it a global thing? Like, are we American that we're raised? Hey, we're Americans. We're revolutionary. We rebelled against the king. Yeah, maybe. We made our own country. We won't stand for this kind of. You know what I mean? That's America. Yeah. But the thing is, it's universal.
I feel like it's universal, yeah, because it's kind of like our need for balance. So you get like someone who's just starts out their starting point as an underdog, whether it be in a movie or in life or just in any situation that you're presented with. If someone feels like an underdog, it just feels like an imbalance of some sort, power imbalance, whatever kind of imbalance. So we kind of, part of our mind, I think anyway, this is what it feels like when I experience it. Part of your mind kind of wants it to be more balanced. We want him to get out of that underdog situation. So when he does, it's almost like a feeling of satisfaction, It's almost like it feels like justice or something like that. It's like it feels so unfair, unbalanced that this the empire is.
We just like seeing the underdog win.
Yeah, that's what it is. Why it is. I think it's what it feels like.
I guess that's the traditional heroic. That's what it is.
Yeah.
It's the traditional. It's one of the traditional whatever there are 4 heroic journeys. One of those heroic journeys is David and Goliath. The little guy stands up to the big guy, and we all appreciate that.
You ever seen Rocky 4?
Which
Drago.
One? Is that Drago? Yeah, for sure.
Come on, that was a good one. Really good.
Dynamics of an insurgency, you got leadership objectives, ideology, environment and geography, external support and sanctuaries, phasing and timing. Leadership we know about. One thing they say is extreme decentralization results in a movement that rarely functions as a coherent body. So usually insurgencies are super decentralized, which means they have a hard time sort of coordinating mass movements together. Objectives, they got to have clear objectives. They got their ideology and narrative. Narrative's a word that gets thrown around all the time. What's the story that we're telling, right? And how do we fit everything into the story that we're telling? Ideas are a motivating factor in insurgent violence. Insurgencies gather recruits and amass popular support through ideological appeal. Recruits are often young men suffering from frustrated hopes and unable to improve their lot in life. It's what I just said.
Yeah.
The insurgent group provides them identity, purpose, and community in addition to physical, economic, and psychological security. I mean, how just blatantly obvious is that? The movement's ideology explains its followers' tribulations and provides a course of action to remedy those ills.
Yep. Yeah, man, I think, again, back to that balance thing, where we kind of want that. Like, think about this, too, where, okay, there's this place, I don't know where, Ireland. It wasn't Ireland, I don't think. I don't know. It was somewhere where you get, like, criminals, bad criminals, murders, like rapist type guys or whatever, and in jail, and it's not even called jail, I don't think. It's essentially a rehab center. But in the rehab center, this is what you get. You get like pets, and it's essentially like a for therapy to rehabilitate them. So there's punishment and then there's rehabilitation, right? They focus on no punishment. It's just rehabilitation. And apparently, from what I read or whatever, it's like pretty successful.
That's good.
Here's the thing, though, with that. It feels super unsatisfying because you get a guy who raped, a lady, killed her, and then killed the husband or something like that, for example. He goes, no punishment. He goes to this place where he gets pets. He gets, he can hang with girls. He makes friends. He gets he learns stuff, skills and stuff like that. He's not locked in a cell. He's at a little resort kind of thing.
Even murderers?
Even murders, yeah. Yeah, okay. 100%. So yeah, there's no punishment part of it.
So where's the no satisfaction come in?
Bruh, if the victim of this criminal is like your wife or something, and this guy gets to go to a resort.
Oh, you're saying the victims have no satisfaction in seeing this rehabilitation take place.
Exactly.
They just want to go blood for blood.
Yeah, it seems like that imbalance still remains because this guy gets to improve his life after he killed my wife. Meanwhile,
are you sure it's murderers and everything?
Yeah, that's what I read. That's why to me it was so impactful. That'd be real
problematic. I don't know how well that would work here.
Yeah,
because you get some vengeance going down.
Oh yeah,
time.
But here was the thing, and the point of the article was that there was what do you call it when you go back to you go to jail and then you get out, then you go back to jail? It's like
going back to jail.
Yeah, I was recidivism. It's like relapse kind of thing. Yep. The rate was so astronomically good that no one went back to jail. It was like that. It was so effective at rehabilitating the person. But meanwhile, when you think about it, man, there's still this massive imbalance. It's like people wouldn't be very happy with that. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But as a society, as a whole, as far as groups, as far as criminals getting rehabilitated, which, I mean, how can you be against criminals being rehabilitated?
Yeah.
It's hard to be against that, But we still don't get that satisfaction. We need that, It's like that imbalance, not being balanced.
Well, I just, back to this here, just this idea that you have, and it says, young men. That's who we're talking about. We're talking about young men that are unable to improve their lot in life. And this is how you end up with these people getting drawn into these super usually extremist type organizations. The most powerful ideologies tap latent emotive concerns of the populace, such as the desire for justice, religious beliefs, or liberation from foreign occupation. Ideologies provide a prism including a vocabulary and analytical categories through which the situation is assessed. Thus, ideology can shape the movement's organization and operational method. You know what's interesting? You start tracking on that, what did they call it here? Just vocabulary is what they call it. But, you know, you track any sort of organization that's out there that sort of has a, you know, you look at some things, you go, that's kind of got a weird culty feeling to it. Yeah. One of the main things that gives something a culty feeling is when you hear the vocabulary that's all being used, and it's all not just used, but it's used as like this weird kind of way to answer any questions and circular arguments, and it always comes back to these things, and you're like, well, this is getting kind of funky over here.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Very strange. Environment and geography, external support and sanctuaries. These are all just really getting into some of the details. I will stop at this one though. Phasing and timing. Insurgencies often pass through common phases of development. Not all insurgencies experience such phase development, and progression through all phases is not a requirement for success. So there's different phases that you can go through, and like I said earlier, and this is why you got to pay attention. You don't have to go through every phase. You don't start at phase 1, go to phase 2, then phase 3, and then you defeat it at phase 3. No, you can still go back to phase 2. You defeat phase 2, they go back to phase 1. Then you think, oh, I think we're under control. Then they go to 2 again. So they go back and forth. You got to pay attention to that. Talks about insurgent networks. Here's some of those insurgent vulnerabilities. Secrecy. Because they got to keep a secret, sometimes they have trouble getting the word out there. Mobilization. It can be hard for them to mobilize support for a couple reasons. One of the things they talk about here is to mobilize their base to support insurgent groups use a combination of propaganda and intimidation, and they may overreach in both. Counterinsurgents should be able to use information operations to effectively exploit inconsistencies in the insurgents' message, as well as their excessive uses of force for intimidation. So definitely in Iraq, the insurgents went overboard in trying to intimidate people, and it pissed off the local populace, and it definitely pissed off the sheikhs in the Battle of Ramadi. Like, they got pissed, and some of them fled, some of them got scared, but some of them got mad, and the local populace was saying, we're not. As soon as they saw that there was enough American presence and Iraqi government presence to say, okay, thank you for being here, we'll help you get bad guys out, they were on board. Financial weakness. It's tough for them to find funding. Internal divisions. This is an important one to pay attention to. Counterinsurgents must remain alert for signs of divisions within an insurgent movement. Again, when you're dealing with a group of people and they're all massed against you, look for those cracks. Look for ways that they're not sort of in unison. And if you can exploit and expand those cracks, all of a sudden you can break down their unification, which is a positive thing. And isn't it weird? Again, I have this little guilty thing in the back of my head that's like, I don't want to break down, the rebels, right? Because I've been programmed by Star Wars to support the rebels, and by the American Revolutionary War. That's who I identify with. We identify with the rebels.
Yeah, I'll tell you an example of that. You ever watched The Matrix? And I know I'm real movie heavy this episode.
I've watched it. I saw it one time in the theater, so I don't remember much about it.
So there's this guy, I forget his name. The guy from Bad Boys. Anyway, you know him, he's an actor.
I definitely know him then.
What was his name? Not APOC. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So basically, so you know what the Matrix is about, right?
Yeah.
Everyone's plugged in the Matrix. And then meanwhile, Morpheus, Lawrence Fishburne, saves all these people from the Matrix, right? And the real reality is
the only thing I remember this whole movie is when I think the main character says, "Jiu-jitsu. I know jiu-jitsu." That's what I remember.
Yes.
Trying to get that download.
Yeah, you got that. Yeah, for sure. So Morpheus plucks everyone out of the Matrix. Matrix is like everyday life. You know, just look at a job and whatever, you're living life or whatever. When you get plucked out of the Matrix, the real reality is a straight up dystopia. Straight up. Machines running everything. You're living in, in post-apocalyptic times. So this one guy, it starts to weigh on him apparently. And he's like, bro, I don't even like this. I kind of liked it better in the Matrix, being ignorant. So he ends up teaming with the agents, which is like the agents of the Matrix, these little guys that roll around, and betraying the rebels. That's what that is right there. That when you find little slight divisions and then you exploit them, and he ran the risk of bringing down the whole team. See what I'm saying?
Wait, which team?
Morpheus and the team.
But he wanted to do that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he didn't run the risk. He could have.
Yeah.
Wasn't a risk to him. He wanted to.
Yeah.
So does he take the blue pill? Is that right?
No, he said, and this is what indicates that there was a fracture in it, just a little bit of a division. When it was like one of the early scenes with him, he was talking to Neo, the main character, and he was like, "You're thinking this." I'm paraphrasing. He's like, "Why didn't I take the blue pill?" He was like saying like, "Oh, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that." Meanwhile, I don't know if that was what the blue pill is like you stay in the Matrix. Right. The red pill is you see, So basically he was indicating that he was sort of thinking of like that he regretted it a little bit kind of thing. That was like the little fracture that they showed in the story. Then, So they almost lost. But, Matrix or Morpheus, Neo, they're very powerful.
They were able to keep it real. Yes. This is the Hollywood Podcast with Echo Charles and Echo Charles. Aspects of Counter-Insurgency. This is so all that kind of I hate to say that was like the introduction, but this is where we get into aspects of Counter-Insurgency. This is how we actually overcome the insurgency. In almost every case, the counterinsurgent faces a populace containing an active minority supporting a government and a similar militant faction opposing it. And they kind of lay out, look, it's pretty much like a bell curve. Whatever the cause, there will be an active minority that totally supports the cause. There'll be a neutral or passive. That's the majority of people are just, hey, we don't really care. And then you've got an active minority against the cause, which this is something important to think about in life, especially like right now in America. Yeah. Who do you hear from? You hear from the two way far extreme ends of the spectrum. Yeah. Everyone else is just trying to live a life and do the right thing and feels considers things sort of as a group, like all pretty much the same. Yeah. Hey, this makes sense. This doesn't make sense. Yeah. This is smart. This isn't smart. Yeah. And then there's people on the spectrums, on the outside of the spectrum that are jumping up and down, screaming and getting crazy. Oh, yeah. They are not the majority of humans. They're a small number of people. Yeah. But boy, they make a lot of noise.
They call them the vocal minority.
Yeah.
This is the silent majority.
Yeah. I think silent majority was Nixon originally said that. Yeah. Upon assuming coin mission, soldiers and Marines must not only be prepared to identify their opponents and approaches to insurgency they are applying, counterinsurgents must also understand the broader strategic context within which they are operating. So you need to think about the bigger picture, obviously. Historical principles. Number 1, legitimacy is the main objective. The primary objective of any counterinsurgent is to foster the development of effective governance by legitimate government. All governments rule through a combination of consent and coercion. Now think about that from a leadership perspective. All leaders, just think if I said all leaders rule through a combination of consent and coercion. That makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. You're coercing people to do, and they're consenting. They're saying, okay, we'll do it. Governments described as legitimate rule primarily with the consent of the governed, while those ruled as illegitimate tend to mainly rely on coercion, like making and forcing people to do things, which you probably heard me say this at echelon front events, when I'm always saying, well, I never really had to order anyone to do anything. We would just kind of talk about it and things would happen. Why? Because I was legitimately in these positions. I wasn't there just, hey, I have the rank and that's why I'm in this position. Like, no, I have some experience. I listen to other people. Like, that's what's good. Citizens obey the state. Oh, this is talking about the illegitimate. So if you're an illegitimate leader, the citizens obey the state for fear of the consequences of doing otherwise, rather than because they voluntarily accept its rule. A government that derives its power from the governed tends to be accepted by the citizens as legitimate. So if you're elected, right? If that's where you got your power from, then it's usually considered legitimate. It still uses coercion, for example, against criminals, but the bulk of the population voluntarily accepts its governance. In Western liberal tradition, a government that derives its just powers from the people and responds to their desires while looking out for their welfare is accepted as legitimate. So that's your goal as a leader. And anytime that you rely on a leader, on your rank, on your authority, on your power, anytime you're doing that, you're taking away from your legitimacy. Legitimacy makes it easier for the state to carry out its key functions, which include the capability to regulate social relationships, extract resources and appropriate or use resources in determined ways. Governance that is not legitimate is inherently unstable because as soon as the state's coercive power is disrupted, the population ceases to obey it. This is when you hear me talking about, hey, you might be, if I bark and if I'm your boss and I say, Echo, you better wear your gloves when you're in this compound or I'm going to fire you, right? You're going to do it. But when I'm not there, you're not going to do it. No. So this is why that type of leadership doesn't work. Coercive leadership, threatening people. That's why it doesn't work. It's not freaking legitimate.
Yeah.
Five indicators of legitimacy can be used to analyze. Frequent selection of leaders in a manner considered just and fair by a substantial majority of the population. That includes promotions, right? If people are getting promoted for good reasons that make sense, then they're considered to be more legitimate. A high level of popular participation in or support for the political process. A low level of corruption. When you as a leader do things that you know aren't right. When you make little maneuvers that you shouldn't be making, guess what? Your level of legitimacy goes down. You need to maintain the high ground. A culturally acceptable level or rate of political, economic, and social development. A high level of regime acceptance by major social institutions. Governments that score high in these categories probably have the support of an adequate majority of the population. As leaders that score well in these areas are also going to have a high level of support. Military action can address these symptoms of a loss of legitimacy. However, restoring legitimacy can only be accomplished using all instruments of national power. Without the host nation government achieving legitimacy, coin cannot succeed. So you can beat people down all day long. That doesn't give you legitimacy. You can solve tactical problems with military might, with brute force. Doesn't help you. You can't win. You can't win with that. Isn't it crazy to think this big military manual? You cannot win with just military force. You cannot beat someone into submission. It doesn't work. Well, it doesn't work on a long-term scale.
Yeah.
Couple other things here. Unity of effort is essential. That's true with any leadership. Political factors are primary. One of the generals from Mao Zedong's Central Committee once stated that Revolutionary War was 80% political action and 20% military action. 80% of it is political action. 80% of it is maneuvering. understand the local environment. You have to do this. Here's a couple. The local population is critical center of gravity of an insurgency. Successful conduct of counterinsurgency operation depends on thoroughly understanding the society and culture within which they are being conducted. Soldiers and Marines must understand the following about the population in the area of operations: how key groups of society are organized, relationships and tensions above them, ideologies and narratives that resonate with the groups, group interests and motivations, means by which groups communicate, the society's leadership system. And what's so funny about this is at Echelon Front, when we go and consult with a company, these are the things that we're trying to figure out during our assessment phase. We're trying to figure out, okay, we figure out how their task organized, what are they set up like. Then we start going, what are the relationships? Where are the tensions? Then what narratives resonate with the group, with the different groups, right? You got the frontline leaders that are saying, oh, they never do that. You got the senior leadership that's saying, oh, what would they know? You see what I'm saying? There's little narratives that we're trying. Group interests and motivations, you got to know what those are. Means by which the groups communicate. How do they actually talk to each other? Is there an open line of communication? So these are all things that we look at to figure out how we fix leadership inside of a company.
Do you do that because, like, did you get that straight from here, or do you just happen to do that and boom, there's a parallel?
Well, we don't just happen to do that. In order to solve the problems inside of a company, you have to understand these things.
Right. But you knew that for sure.
Yes.
Yeah. And
so,
but did you get it from there?
I get what you're saying. No, I didn't get it from this.
Gotcha.
But when you know the way broadly, you see it in all things.
Yeah.
And I'm sure as I worked with companies, you start saying, well, how's your relationship with that department over there? And hey, so explain to me what you think, where you think the company's going, right? What's the narrative? It just lines up.
Yeah.
Because you have to figure these things out.
Do you go in kind of like good cop, bad cop? When
you don't have to. You don't really have to have good cop, bad cop. Because everybody knows that we're there to help. Yeah. Right? We're not trying to bust them. We're trying to help.
Right.
And so
that's true.
People tell us everything that they're very open and honest with us.
Yeah. Do you ever do like little sly things, like, and I guess I shouldn't say sly, because you know how, like, if you're really trying to ask this question, but you can't just come out and ask that question because you can't expect them to just come out and give you that straight dope answer. So you kind of ask these other questions to kind of get a frame.
What you want to know is, are there interrogation tactics that are being utilized when we're interviewing the personnel that we are consulting? That's your question.
Yes, sir.
Of course.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's not, you're right that they're not sly.
Right.
It's like we're getting information from people that they want to tell us. It's not, we don't have to set them up or coerce them to say things, or we don't have to. We talk to them.
Yeah.
Here's what the advantage that we have is people want their company to be successful.
Yeah. And
so when you ask them, hey, what works well? They tell you. When you say, hey, are there any issues? They tell you because they want to have those issues fixed. This is the easiest part of the job, is gathering this information. Knowing what information to gather is important, but the easiest part of the job is gathering this information, because people are they're just more than happy to tell us what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense.
Couple things that are required of soldiers and Marines at every echelon when you need to know about the cultural context. You got to have a clear, nuanced, and empathetic appreciation of the essential nature of the conflict. So you got to hear and listen to both sides. Doesn't that make sense?
Yeah, and essentially, like, have some understanding.
Yes.
Like hey,
empathy.
Yeah. Like, I can see how you think that.
I can see how you think that. I can see where you're coming from.
Yeah.
That's a good idea to have in your head for life, for living, bro, for being a human.
It's so true. Like, the idea that, like, someone just doesn't get where that person's coming from. It's almost like, bro, that's just because a lack of effort,
Yeah. And here's the deal. You're missing out.
Yeah.
You're missing out. If I argue with you and I don't listen to what you're saying and I don't see what your viewpoint is, there's no way I can defeat you in an argument. I don't understand you. Yeah. How can I defeat you in an argument unless I understand where you're coming from? Yeah. And not necessarily even defeat you. How can I find a solution if I don't understand where you're coming from? Because I'm not looking to defeat you in an argument. That's what you do when you're 20. That's what you do when you're 23. Defeat people in arguments. Yeah. When you're hopefully by the time you're 48, like me, you actually don't want to defeat someone. You want to find a solution. Yeah. There's a lot of arguing that happens just broadly. Yeah. I mean, right now we're seeing it all day long, every day in the emotional media, social media, mainstream media. It's just total no listening, all talking, no perspective, no empathy. Yeah. Well, I shouldn't say no, because there are a lot of people that are actually listening, trying to figure out what the solution is. Yeah. But many people, they don't want to try and figure out what the solution is. They want to defeat the other person in an argument, which is so pointless. So then you need to understand the motivation, strengths, and weaknesses of the insurgents. That's obviously important. Mm-hmm. You want to conduct intelligence-driven operations, meaning we want to actually pay attention to what's going on. We want to gather good intel. Isolate insurgents from their cause and support. Smart move. Establish security under the rule of law. The cornerstone of any COIN effort is security for the civilian population. And this is probably the number 2 line that I stole from this. Thank you, General Mattis. Thank you, General Petraeus, because when I had to start discussing up the chain of command what we were doing, why we were doing it, it was this line right here. The cornerstone of any counterinsurgency effort is security for the civilian populace. Because what we were doing, Task Unit Bruiser, was going out and killing bad guys in order to protect the civilian populace. And that right there is the cornerstone of counterinsurgency. So we were able to just get all of our missions approved up the chain of command because what we were doing was in support of the cornerstone of counterinsurgency. Thank you for getting those chapters out early enough that I had this to lean on. Illegitimate actions. This is just so illegitimate actions by government officials, security forces, and multinational partners are those involving the use of power without authority. Oh, wow. Power without authority. When you use power without authority or you abuse power, you illegitimize yourself. Every action by counterinsurgents leaves a forensic trace that may need to be used in a court of law. Counterinsurgents document all their activities to preserve, wherever possible, a chain of evidence, and more importantly, as a means to insurgent propaganda. This is epic, and I'll tell you why. Because inside businesses, you make some little move. You make some little move and you think no one's going to know it. Yeah. But it leaves a forensic trace. And that's just a different way of saying, I am always telling people everyone's watching you. And if you try and lie to them, they know it. Yeah. That's what's happening. Yeah. That's 100% what's happening. You try and lie to somebody, they know it. You try and make a maneuver on somebody, there's a forensic trace, and they know it. Don't do your little maneuvers to try and take care of yourself. Prepare for a long-term commitment. Back to that protracted war idea. Here's some contemporary imperatives of counterinsurgency. Manage information and expectations. Achieving steady progress towards a set of reasonable expectations can increase the population's tolerance for the inevitable inconvenience entailed by ongoing counterinsurgency operations. So just setting good expectations. Setting good, realistic expectations and then moving towards them so that you can look around at the team and say, hey, look, we're making progress. This is where we're going and this is how we're getting there. We're making progress. Both the counterinsurgent and the host government ensure that their deeds match their words. Do what you say what you do. Here's the other thing that triggered me into talking about this. Use measured force. Any use of force generates a series of reactions. There may be times when an overwhelming effort is necessary to intimidate an opponent or reassure the populace, but the type and amount of force to be applied and who wields it should be carefully calculated by a counterinsurgent for any operation. An operation that kills 5 insurgents is counterproductive if the collateral damage of the creation of blood feuds leads to the recruitment of 50 more. Now, this was a little bit strange because there was some of that idea that, every time you kill an insurgent, you create 5 more. I would definitely hear that. I didn't see it. What I actually saw was the opposite. When we would kill an insurgent, the local populace would be like, okay, they got emboldened. They got braver. They got tougher. They gave us more support.
Why did they say that? Or what was their thought?
The thought is, hey, if they see you kill, some kid, some family member, right? Some family member gets killed. And you think, okay, well, we just created, there's 5 brothers.
Right, they're mad.
And now they're mad. Yeah. But actually, oftentimes it was like, hey, don't follow what Freddie did.
Yeah.
We know he was doing bad stuff, and he got killed. Mm-hmm. And they kind of got it. And I'll tell you what, they also, to a huge extent, understood collateral damage. The local populace understood collateral damage. So if we blew up a building or blew up a door and we entered a building and it shattered the windows and it turns out that it was either the wrong building or whatever, and we'd say, okay, you know what? Hey, we'd give them a bunch of money. We'd apologize. We'd say what happened, explain to them. And they would be like, yeah, well, you are at war.
Yeah.
And this is how I know that this is real, is they'd give us information.
Yeah.
They'd say, "Oh yeah, I know who you're looking for. You're looking for that guy? Yeah, he's been gone for 2 weeks."
Yeah.
And then we'd say, "Yeah, thanks. We know it's our fault. Here's some money."
Yeah. It's weird how to hear it, because you get, whether it be reports or usually it's from someone who has a different, I don't want to say agenda necessarily, but if someone's against the war or something, mm-hmm. That's kind of their deal, So they're kind of trying to they're trying to convince that.
And I don't want to paint this, beautiful picture, because obviously there's obviously times where, there's one of those brother gets killed and one of the other brothers says, I'm going to go avenge, go avenge. But you know what? Think about it. In a family, right? Yeah. The mom and dad, there's 4 brothers. One of the brothers is out doing insurgent stuff.
Sure. Yeah.
And he gets killed.
Yeah.
The mom and dad are looking at the other brothers going, hey, do not go and do what your brother. Does that happen all the time? No, not all the time. Sometimes the dad says, we'll avenge, go avenge your brother.
Right.
Not usually.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and then, the point is too, where you from the outside, you kind of hear someone's argument and you kind of like, well, that makes sense.
Yeah,
just
totally
like how you said, where it's like, the brother got killed. If your brother got killed, you would at the very least have some feelings of vengeance, at the very least. Mm-hmm. Not to mention people who live in a war zone who are down for the fight a lot of the time. Right. They're going to see their brother get killed. They're going to be like, hell yeah, I'm gonna come avenge. That doesn't stick out as a lie to me.
So and it is true. The problem is it's very simplified.
Yeah.
Right. Because what's really happening? What's really happening is the dad is going, hey, do you remember Saddam Hussein? He was horrible. These Americans came and kicked his ass and got him out of here. And now we're moving in the right direction. Now you want to go fight them? What's wrong with you? And then that guy ends up getting killed. And he looks at his brother and said, you see what happens?
Yeah. Yeah. And when you explain that, you're kind of like, whoa, well, that makes a lot of sense too.
It's real easy just to stereotype and throw everyone with a broad brush and say, everyone thinks like this.
Yeah.
It's totally not true, man. Even in a family, there'd be some kids would be insurgents, some kids wouldn't.
Yeah. And that's not to mention some of the terror that these normal families have been,
absolutely
inflicted on them. And then it's like, yeah, okay. When you say they understand collateral damage, it's kind of like the way you said it is almost like, and which is actually correct from my perspective, where it sounds obvious. Everyone understands collateral damage, like everyone kind of understands that, But, so why would we assume that they don't? Like everyone should understand.
Exactly.
So when you say it, you're like, well, of course,
because we dehumanize.
Yeah,
we dehumanize the local populace and think that they're just there. Here's a common emotion. You blew up my door. I'm mad.
Right,
I'm going to fight you now. When it's when actually you're dealing with human beings, and people forget that we're dealing with human beings that are smart.
Right.
And they think, oh, you blew up their door. Now they're going to want to plant a roadside bomb. No. Yeah. Actually, when you blow up their door and you say, hey, we were looking for this guy and he wasn't here. Do you know where he is? Oh, he's been gone for 2 weeks. Yeah. Hey, sorry about your door. Here's some money. By the way, we're going to send a team out here and hang a new door for you, which we did.
Yeah.
And they go, yeah, appreciate it. Yep. Please let your friends know that there's no bad guys that live here. And by the way, the only problems we've had on the street is that building down there. Yeah. There's been some people in and out of there. You might want to keep an eye on it. You go, okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah. And see, even hearing that, it's like, brother, that makes sense. In fact, that sounds more likely. If you were in that situation, you'd feel that way.
That's what I'm saying. So this idea that every time you kill a person, you kill a bad guy, that now 5 more, it's totally untrue. And not to mention there's some people that are like, oh, sheesh, I don't want to go get involved with that.
I know.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what there's a high deterrence level. Yeah. There's a very strong deterrence level, because what people miss out on is just like you said, and the way I always explain Iraqi families, I'm like, oh, you want to know what an Iraqi family is like? They're like a family. Yeah, they're like a family, and there's the dad's got this and the mom's got this going on, and the kids, and they've got a rebellious kid, right? You go into one of the rooms and there's like weird pictures of whatever, Iraqi movie stars. I mean, music stars and like. Yeah. They're just people, and we just paint them with this broad brush of how we think they will react or how we've been told that they'll react, and it's just not true. Gotta learn and adapt. Oh, before I go there, who wields force? Who wields force is also important. Providing the police have a reasonable reputation for competence and impartiality, it is better to let police, and these are police that are local police, handle urban raids rather than soldiers and Marines, even if the police are not as well armed or as capable as military units, since the populace is likely to view that application of force as more legitimate. So you want the Iraqis to handle their own problems. Now, in Ramadi, there was... What made it tricky is a lot of the Iraqi army soldiers were Shia and the local populace in Ramadi was Sunni. That's why as quickly as we could, we got the Sunni policemen, Iraqi policemen that were from Ramadi to start doing these kind of things. Because there was more, in some cases, not in all cases, in some cases there was more tension between the Shia soldiers and the local populace than there was between the Americans and the local populace. Huh. Learn and adapt. An effective counterinsurgent force is a learning organization. Right back to our podcast we did with Dave Burke.
Good deal, Dave.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Empower the lowest levels. Mission command is the conduct of military operations through decentralized execution based upon mission orders for effective mission accomplishment. What does that mean? It means higher commanders empower subordinates to make decisions with the commander's intent. They leave details of execution to their subordinates and require them to use initiative and judgment to accomplish the mission. Decentralized command. Thank you. Support the host nation. And what the little part I wanted to pull out of this support the host nation thing is American forces committed to COIN are there to assist a host government. The long-term goal is to leave a host that is capable of standing on its own 2 feet. In that end, the host nation has to win its own war. Achieving this requires the development of viable local leaders and institutions. U.S. forces and agencies can help, but host nation elements must be able to accept responsibility to achieve real victory. And then it goes on to warn that you can't You can't be the easy button. When something needs to happen, you can't say, okay, well, we're Americans, we can make that happen. No, you need to actually not be the easy button. And this is one of the last sections here. It's called Paradoxes of the Counter-Insurgency, which if I would have named this section, would have been called The Dichotomies of Counterinsurgency.
Sure.
But you know what we're saying. Principles and imperatives discussed above reveal that COIN presents a complex and often unfamiliar set of missions and considerations for a military commander. In many ways, the conduct of a counterinsurgency is counterintuitive to a traditional American view of war. And that right there, that statement is why I'm saying if you're going to start to overlay warfare principles in your business, in your life, you need to also include counterinsurgency in there, because sometimes they're counterintuitive. Sometimes they're different than traditionally the way you think of war. And I think this whole attitude is so important to be able to take warfighting and overlay it into other scenarios. If you only know how to fight a conventional war of attrition, you can't overlay those principles over the rest of your life. They won't work all the time. They're not nuanced enough. They don't understand the complexities. And one of those complexities is there's paradoxes and there's dichotomies. Number one, the more you protect your force, the less secure you are. What does that mean? You have to take risks. And when you take risks, when you get outside the wire, when you go work with the local populace, the more secure you'll end up being. So as a leader, if you stay locked up in your office, you feel like you're safe in there because you're not out there, getting engaged with people, not getting asked tough questions. The less secure you are. You need to get out there. Next one, the more force used, the less effective it is. Boom. When you're barking orders, when you're, yelling at people, when you're saying you better do this or I'll fire you, whatever those things are, the more force you use as a leader, the less effective it is. When you use the minimum force required, that's the most powerful. The next is the more successful COIN is, the less force that can be used and the more risk that must be accepted. So as you proceed down the path, you need to use less and less force and you have to take more and more risk, which is crazy. The initial reaction to the counterinsurgency push in Ramadi was enemy attacks are going up and American casualties are going up. And guess what? It was true. So some people up the chain of command, not my chain of, yes, all up the chain of command. Everyone was saying, wait, there's more. What's happening? There's more enemy attacks and there's more American casualties. This isn't working. No, actually, that's exactly what's going to happen. Sometimes doing nothing is the best reaction. Often an insurgent carries out a terrorist or guerrilla act with the primary purpose of enticing the counterinsurgent to overreact or at least react in a way that can be exploited. If a careful assessment of the effects of a course of action concludes that more negative than positive effects will result, an alternative should be considered, potentially including a decision not to act. Now this is, default aggressive. This is not default aggressive. Bias for action. This is not taking action, but default aggressive and bias for action. Bias for action is what the Marine Corps says they want Marines to act. They want them to have a bias to actually do something. Right. They want a bias to take action. Default aggressive is the echelon front. This is me telling young junior officers in the SEAL team, hey, your default has got to be go take action, make something happen. But both bias for action and default aggressive, neither one of those say 100% go. No, it's default, meaning that's what your default is, but you might have to adjust it. Bias for action doesn't mean you take action, it means you lean towards taking action. Sometimes you need to look at the situation and say, you know what's going to help here? Nothing. The best weapons for COIN do not shoot. Counterinsurgents achieve the most meaningful success by gaining popular support and legitimacy for the host government. So how often is it that you as a leader can make more progress by, instead of telling someone, no, we're going to do it my way. Instead of shooting them in the face with that, you say, okay, your way sounds good. You increase your legitimacy as opposed to decreasing it when you fire one off in their face. The host nation doing something tolerably is better than us doing it well. Hey, as a leader, when you got a subordinate leader, you know you can do it better than your subordinate. Mm-hmm. But it's oftentimes better to let them do it good enough. If a tactic works this week, it might not work next week. If it works in this province, it might not work in the next. You got to keep an open mind. You got to change. You got to adapt. Tactical success guarantees nothing. When Colonel Harry Summers allegedly told a North Vietnamese counterpart in 1975 that, quote, you know you never defeated us on the battlefield, end quote, the reply supposedly was, quote, that may be so, but it is also irrelevant, end quote. Military actions by themselves cannot achieve a success in coin. Tactical actions must not only be linked to the operational and strategic military objectives, but also to the essential political goals of coin. Tactical success guarantees nothing. As a matter of fact, it's irrelevant, according to this North Vietnamese colonel. Last one. Most of the important decisions are not made by generals. It's the competence and judgment of soldiers and Marines at all levels. Senior leaders must set the proper tone for actions by their organizations with thorough training and clear guidance, and then trust their subordinates to do the right thing. Preparation for the tactical level leaders requires more than service doctrine. They must also be trained and educated to adapt their local situations, understand the legal and ethical implications of their actions, and exercise subordinates' initiative and sound judgment to meet their senior commander's intent. You, at a company, in an organization, as the CEO, as the COO, as the president, as the guy in charge, most of the important decisions are not made by you. They're made by someone out there on the front line, so you better lead them correctly. Little section on successful practices and unsuccessful practices. I'll read some of the unsuccessful practices. Place priority on killing and capturing the enemy, not on engaging the population. What does that mean? That means when you have a problem inside your team and all you do is attack like whoever you think is doing it, that's where your priority is, instead of building relationships with the group, you're wrong.
So when you're a little kid and someone, I don't know, broke the water heater, and no one wants to fess up. So when your dad comes and says, someone tell me or else you'll all get punished. Is that sort of the same thing? Like you shouldn't do that?
That's collective punishing, and I don't really agree with collective punishing. There are times where it's used, for instance, in team building exercises like SEAL training.
Yeah.
Oh, you're going to get that all day long.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. One person makes a mistake, they're going to make everyone pay. And they're doing that actually to create some sort of friction, right? What's wrong with you, Echo? Keep your head under the boat. We're going to keep doing this until Charles gets his head under the boat. Right. Come on, Echo. What's wrong with you?
Yeah, it's kind of like a two little pronged effect, right? One, you want to put more heat on that guy because like letting the team down a lot of times is more punishment than letting yourself down, especially when they're all right there. And then the other part is that friction. Like put some stress on everybody.
Stress everybody
get them
out.
used to it. I remember in football there's like, okay, so in football you say you say what's called a cadence. You say set, down, hut, or go, or whatever, right? The quarterback says it, whatever. So if you start before the actual count, you call for false start, offsides, depending on offense, defense, People call it different things sometimes. So anyway, there are certain drills, like to drill that in your head, and it's like an ongoing drill anyway. So if we're gonna do like some conditioning or something, it'll be in the conditioning. So everyone will line up. Let's say it's wind sprints. They'll be like, okay, the count is on 3. So they'll go, set down, hut, hut, hut. On the third hut, they go. Some people still jump off sides during the conditioning. You see what I'm saying? It's like a drill that constantly goes. So if one guy jumps off sides, everybody pays for it. And sometimes the guy who will jump off sides doesn't pay for it. So basically,
they'll call him out, be like, you just go ahead and sit down, Charles.
Yeah, or basically in a wind sprint situations, the common thing in our situation would be like, okay, let's say it's a 50-yard wind sprint, right? You start at the 0-yard line and you run to the 50 or whatever. So it's the count's on 2, set down hut, one guy jumps off side. Echo jumps off side. Echo stays there. Everyone else goes 5 yards back. So now they have a 55-yard wind sprint. I only have a 50. I do it again. They go 5 yards back again. See what I'm saying? So it puts way more pressure on you to get it right. So you do learn, I think, but some people can get into this weird downward spiral because they're so stressed about everyone mad at them now. So they don't even think. So they can't like get their act together. It's funny, but it's
a good way to create stress.
Yeah, for sure.
Some of the successful practices, the other unsuccessful practices are, very sort of military-based, conduct battalion-sized operations as the norm. That's too big. Concentrate military forces in large bases for protection. We know that that's not going to work. Focus special operations forces primarily on raiding. Like, hey, we're going to go capture, kill bad guys. That's not where you want to put the focus. You need to do it for sure, but it can't be the focus. So then some of the successful practices are emphasize intelligence, focus on the population, their needs, and security. Focus on the population, focus on the people. Establish and expand security areas, isolate insurgents from the population. So those are the kind of things that help out. Place police in the lead with military support. We absolutely tried to do that. We brought the Iraqis with us. We put them in the lead. So those are some solid, successful practices. And here's the summary from this first chapter. Counterinsurgency is an extremely complex form of warfare, truly war at the graduate level. At its core, counterinsurgency warfare is a struggle for the support of the population. Their protection and welfare is the center of gravity of friendly forces. And the decisive terrain. This is something that I stole. Well, I think this is the third big thing that I stole from this to sort of start selling counterinsurgency up my chain of command, was this idea that the center of gravity, the decisive terrain in this fight, was not an airfield. It wasn't a part of town. It was the people. If we got the people, when you storm a beach, once you get the beachhead, once you get a foothold, that's the decisive terrain. Or if you're taking an island, you want to get the high ground. Here, it wasn't the high ground. It wasn't the beachhead. It wasn't the airfield. It was the people. Gaining and maintaining that support is a formidable challenge. There are a host of non-military agencies whose efforts must be synchronized and coordinated with those of military to achieve these aims. And this thing closes out. Insurgents are also fighting for the support of the population, but are constrained by neither the law of war nor the bounds of human decency. They do anything to preserve their greatest advantage, the ability to hide among the people. These amoral enemies survive by their wits, constantly adapting to the situation. To defeat them, it is essential that counterinsurgent forces develop the ability to learn and adapt rapidly and continuously. So, learn and adapt rapidly and continuously seems to be a common theme here on this podcast, in the books that we review, in the people that we talk to, in the lessons that we learn. We seem to hear it over and over and over again as one of the primary and most important attributes of winning. So I think it's pretty clear that you need to take lessons like this, and if you can learn to apply them, and you can't universally apply them, right? And it says in the book, it says you can't just universally apply these things. You always have to be smart enough to pay attention, run a feedback loop, see what's actually happening, and adjust. And you can only do that, by the way, if you're humble enough to actually listen to the feedback loop. Everything is related. Everything is connected. And you can overlay these things into whatever part of your life you need to counter whatever insurgency that you're facing. Whether you're on the battlefield, whether you're in business, you're a leader, you're facing an insurgency in your own family.
Sometimes.
And we also have to pay attention to the fact that we might have an insurgency going on inside of us. An insurgency of weakness. And sloth.
Yeah.
Trying to bring us down. Echo Charles.
Yes, sir.
Do you have any recommendations how we could fight the internal insurgency that we are facing every single day?
Bro, it's there. 100% there. Okay. When you got a workout planned, right? And then boom, you feel the battle going on inside. All the reasons why today should actually, you know what? Think about it. Today should be a rest day. Yeah. That's the one side, and the other side is like, nope, shouldn't be a rest day. In fact, you're weak right now, and let's get stronger. Let's push this. There's a lot of physical benefits, and if you overcome this feeling of not wanting to do the workout and you do it anyway, that's even now you're getting stronger mentally too. And now But meanwhile, it's like, boom, it's a little battle. The other side is like, but you got all that other stuff you could be doing that you need to do. You got this stuff to do. If you get that done, boom, you'll be way better off. I'm just saying, you'll get some recovery, So it's like two battles going on. Insurgents are in there. Oh, yeah. And and it's like that, when you said the insurgency on the inside, it's that. It's the weak part of, it's happened to me before. Oh, go ahead. Let the cat out of the bag right there. So if I'm working on something, right, whatever it may be, and it's time for the workout or whatever, like that part of me would be like, God, just do it tomorrow. Do the workout tomorrow, because look, you got all this thing that you're in the middle of. Getting that done is actually better right now, where it's beneficial. That insurgent is trying to win the heart and mind of my whole actions. See what I'm saying? It's like showing me the benefits, of like skipping the workout. That's kind of evil in a way, But yeah, we got to fight against that. Anyway, so what are we doing? Boom, we're working out. Yeah, for sure. Don't skip the workout. Don't skip it. If you're injured, skip the workout. Today, this very day. Sure. I knew, looking at my week ahead, because what is the day of the week? It is Saturday right now. Yes. So I looked at the week ahead and looked at tomorrow. I'm pretty booked up tomorrow, and the whole week is kind of crazy. And I know that we needed to get this done. So my first thing, I always wake up early in the morning, work out, but I knew I had to prioritize this. And I actually got it done pretty quick. I had already read it, so now I was going through making notes and whatever. But I woke up and did that first. Before the workout, because I had to prioritize and execute. Yes, sir. Understand. So now it's like, I spent like 3 or 4 hours finishing the reading, looking a couple things up, and then I was going through, highlighting. So now it's like 10:30 or something like that. I had a little food, and I had all kinds of excuses locked and loaded. Especially after you eat. Yeah. So what I did was, I had a little insurgency going on. Yeah. And then I just texted you and said, hey, 1:00, let's do it. And I said, as soon as, if he's, I don't care if he responds or not, I'm just going to go get after it before I eat a legitimate food. Yeah. Wait, get after
that's
what, the workout?
Oh, yeah, just went and knocked out a workout.
Yeah.
Just did sort of a combo workout. Took me 40 minutes. You know what I'm saying?
Still solid.
Really solid. But just had to get it done. You know? Had to get it done. Had to overcome that little insurgency situation.
Because sometimes those insurgents can make good points. They're making good points all the time.
They know what they're doing.
Yeah.
They absolutely know what they're doing. That's why you got to be able to counter them.
Oh, man, I was thinking this.
Let's face it, insurgencies are successful often.
Yeah. Yeah, they're not.
If you don't know how to counter them, you're going to be in trouble.
Big time. So I was thinking this yesterday when I was working out. Same way you were, that one time you were teasing me about squats or whatever. You were like, oh, I wonder if Echo squat. Remember you're saying that? Okay, so I was kind of in the same inverse, reverse, whatever scenario where I was like, I wonder if Jocko could do this workout. Like, what if me and Jocko traded workouts, whatever, given day, and we had to do the same workout, same weight, everything. If you can't do it, there's an indicator you can't do it kind of thing, right? So
if you can't do it, it's an indicator that you can't do it.
You know what I'm saying? I'm saying that's the purpose of trading workouts. You know, like you always wonder, like, I wonder if I could do that guy's workout. I wonder if I could do that football player's workout, whatever. You know, you kind of wonder that every once in a while, especially when you see guys working out hard. Like, I wonder, are they, these CrossFit guys or whatever. So that's what I was thinking. I was like, I wonder how I would fare with Jocko's workout, because there's two kinds of like roadblocks, if you will. One is like if I just can't do the weight. Like, let's say your squat is just, it's a bigger squat than me, so if you got freaking a set of 20, a set of 15, a set of 9, and a set of however that goes, and and I got to use your same weight, and I simply can't get 20 reps with that weight. I just physically can't do it. It's kind of like, okay, there's that. That's one. Then the other one is like, this is like, I got to tap out. This is too hard for me. I got to rest more, or I got to like not do 10 sets. I can only do like 5 or whatever. You see what I'm saying? There's that too. So both of those, and probably there's other stuff too, is like, you wonder, how would I fare in that exact workout? Same, weight. Like now we're similar weight as far as body weight or whatever. So it's like, I was wondering that. Like, I wonder if. Then I was like, first I was wondering, I wonder if I could do Jocko's. Then I was thinking, I wonder if he could do mine. I don't think I could do yours.
I think that there's be a Venn diagram where there'd be an overlap in the middle where we could both do each other's workouts. Then I have some workouts that you wouldn't be able to do, and then you have some workouts that I wouldn't be able to do. Yeah, because of our specialties. Right?
Yeah. The Metcons, I feel like, I don't know, because yours are more extended, right? Your Metcons, they're like
probably
like what, 15, 20 minutes or something. Yeah,
or more.
Yeah. See, so but they're gonna be less intense though.
Depends.
Whatever. Nonetheless, I was wondering that. So maybe one day we're gonna see. We should straight up have the workout. I have rest periods built in too. By the way,
that's one thing. Is yours seems more structured.
Yeah.
Well, I guess not. I guess not really, but I just basically I don't have rest periods.
Yeah.
Generally, most of my workouts don't have like a rest, like a timed where you're like 3 minutes of rest. I don't generally have that.
Yeah. Yeah, I do for sure.
Because what I'll be doing is some other exercise during that period.
Yeah, which is yet another type of like workout, like stimulus free. Because let's say let's go basic example. If you go, 5 sets of 12, we'll just say, right? There's a huge difference with not only the weight you can do, but just overall what you're doing to your body for that workout. If you go 1 minute rest in between those sets and 3 minutes rest in between those sets, you're doing essentially 2 different things to your body.
Yeah.
So it's like, all right, which workout am I doing? Then that's why rest is kind of set in there. But then if there's no rest in between the sets and you program it like, oh, I need to get 500 pull-ups. I don't care how I get them. I just got to get them, I don't know, as fast as I can, I guess, or whatever. Or you just got to get 500 pull-ups. It's kind of, that's part of the workout too, so it's like, it's almost like you're doing a specific thing to your body there too, so it's like that fits, you don't have to have rest periods, and I program them in for a reason. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, you have a specific purpose, but nonetheless.
Oh yeah, all right. Oh,
nonetheless,
I forgot. Yes, I'm going to tell people how we can stay on the path.
Yeah.
Effectively, healthy. and effectively and healthy. Anyway, yeah. So when you're working out, you can need fuel. Eat good. 80-20 is good. 80% clean, 20% freedom.
80% discipline, 20% freedom.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Well, diet-wise, that's recommended. You can go 90-10. You can go 90-10. You start going 70-30, then you that's a slippery slope right there. That's what I think. Nonetheless, you want supplementation for your joints, for your brain, for even protein supplements. Boom, we got you Jocko Fuel supplements. Joint warfare for your joints, obviously. Krill oil, omega-3s all day, and antioxidants, by the way. Also, Discipline and Discipline Go, which are essentially the same thing, different delivery systems. Cans and powders. It's true. 100%
and
true.
And pills.
And pills.
What are they called? Capsules.
Yeah, capsules.
Because I told B Little at the beginning. So we started making Discipline. And I said, hey, man, this is really good stuff. Yeah, this is exactly this is what we want, right?
Yes.
I said, but I talk for long periods of time for a living. Yeah. And if I have to drink this to get that hitter, sure. If I have to drink this before I go out and start talking, and then all of a sudden I got to go to the bathroom. I said, I need a pill. I told him. I said, put this stuff into a pill. He goes, okay. And he made, what is it called? It's a compressed, not a capsule, but like a compressed thing, whatever.
Yeah.
And I don't really like those.
Oh, for real?
So then I had to send him back to the drawing board. I was like, bro, and he said you said pill. And I said, I thought that a capsule was a pill. Right? To me, that's the same thing. You take a pill, right? I didn't know that a pill was whatever that compressed thing is, and a capsule is something different.
Yes.
But if you need that little, like you need it, boom, you can take the capsule. Discipline Go.
Not a pill, not a gel cap.
Which actually this stemmed from, so I forget what happened in the world, but there was controversy about veterans and drugs. Mm-hmm. And someone was saying something like, what do you expect to happen when these put all these vets on drugs? Put them on amphetamines. And I said, we're not on amphetamines. And he goes, pilots take amphetamines. And I texted Dave Burke.
Yeah, good deal, Dave.
Yeah. And I said, do they give you guys amphetamines to take? And he goes, no. I mean, this is all within, this is on Twitter. This is probably 2 years ago. He goes, no. And so I go back to the guy, I go, no, they never give pilots amphetamines. And then as soon as I tweeted that, Dave Burke.
Good deal, Dave.
Yeah. He goes back, he goes, bro, I just screwed you. He sent me a text. He's like, bro, I just screwed you. And I was like, what? He goes, they definitely give it to us. And I was like, Roger. Yeah, I said, hey, I was wrong. But guess what they call them?
What?
Go pills.
Okay.
So that's what I was saying to B Little. I said, hey, man, we need go pills. Yeah. No, we don't need amphetamines in them. Right, yeah. In fact, we do not want amphetamines. No, sir, we don't. But we do want the feeling that Discipline and the Discipline powder gives you. Yeah. Little cognitive kick.
Yeah, little get up and go.
Yes. That's why we call it Discipline Go. Anyways, there you go. That's a little information behind that. We got Jocko white tea. We got Molk, strawberry, chocolate for kids. We got mint, peanut butter, the whole 9 yards.
It's true.
And all this stuff is available at Vitamin Shop, or it's available at originmaine.com.
Yeah. Speaking of Origin Maine, other things on there besides Jocko Fuel, like Gießen rash guards for jiu-jitsu when we go back to jiu-jitsu, if we haven't already.
We're kind of getting back there.
Boom. There you
I think there's a underground movement. There's definitely people training.
That's slowly,
JP's training. Texas is open.
Yeah. Yeah, there's I heard a thing that gyms are opening June 15th or something like this.
They opened with a bunch of restrictions.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but we're getting there.
Yeah, coming out from the underground for sure.
So you're going to need a new gi.
Yep. Origin gi, best ones factually in the world, by the way. Mm-hmm. And fully in America, of course. Yes. Made in America, of course.
Which is kind of important right now.
Big time.
You want to get your stuff that's made in America, not made in China.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's my recommendation anyways.
Agree.
Don't forget about jeans. Don't forget about boots. Don't forget about T-shirts, hoodies, and don't forget about joggers. Unless you're me. If you're me, don't get joggers.
Yeah, just forget about them.
Yeah,
actually.
don't. There's there's a whole just plethora of reasons why if your name is Jocko, don't get joggers. They just don't work.
Yeah, don't
just
get
was
them.
not meant to be.
Don't put them on. Just
if your name is Echo Charles,
all day.
All day.
Joggers all day.
All day.
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, orangemain.com also. Jocko has a store that's called JockoStore.com. That's where you can get your shirts, custom shirts. Maybe you stretching that word custom for, but nonetheless, you can represent discipline equals freedom. Good. Take the high ground. The high ground take you. Get after it. It's a good one. Anyway, shirts that you can represent on the path while you're on the path. Good stuff. Anyway, some hats on there, some other cool stuff. So yeah, if you like something, get something. We have an email list. Here's the thing. I always feel kind of odd, for lack of a better term, saying, hey, sign up for our email list. It feels weird saying that.
Well, that's because you have been conditioned in your life that every time somebody told you that and you did it, you got a bunch of junk.
Yes. And I don't want to say spam necessarily, but yeah, it's one of these things where, I'm down. I am down for the email list 100%. If I'm like, oh, wait, I do want updates on this stuff right here. Like, I'm down. I'm not conditioned necessarily against it, but here's the thing. I have felt the sting of signing up for the email list, hoping that I'll be updated with like new cool stuff that they offer or whatever. But meanwhile, they're sending me like, oh, happy Valentine's Day from XYZ.com. It's like, bro, I don't care about you wishing me happy Valentine's Day in my email inbox, which, let's face it, our email inbox for most of us, for some of us, we'll say, I think most of us, but whatever, our inbox is kind of sacred. Like, bro, stay out of there if you don't have something significant.
That's the way it should be.
Yeah. So anyway, my point there is if you sign up for this.
So you're saying all this now, you're going to tell everyone they should sign up for the email list.
I'm not saying anyone should do anything ever. Maybe not ever, but I'm not saying in this case. But I'm saying we do have an email list. If you do want updates, and here's basically what we'll send out is like if there's a new design or a new hoodie or a new whatever. That's it. Pretty much for the store. With the occasional, and when I say occasional, I mean very occasional exception where if there's like some important announcement, and important is like it has to be very important.
What's an example of an important announcement that's come out on the email list? Because I'm on the email list.
Has come out?
Yeah.
None.
Okay, that's what I was going to say. I haven't got any important announcements.
I'm just saying
from
that.
Echo Charles.
No, none.
On the email list.
None have been, but I'm saying if there was like, hey, freaking no podcast for 1 month or, something that like I would anticipate a bunch of people trying to email me or you about, then maybe. But I mean, I can't think of anything offhand specifically, but it'll be real important, I think. I will firmly believe that it's important. Anyway, otherwise, you're just going to get new stuff every, once a month, maybe once every 2-3 months.
Yes.
Maybe. Yeah. So anyway, I'm not going to abuse you. That's what I'm saying. I realize that everyone's inbox is sacred.
Let's get to okay. Where do they sign up for this email address list thing?
On JockoStore.com at the bottom.
Should I make some kind of an email? Hey.
No, bro.
Okay.
I don't think so.
We'll get feedback.
Leave everybody alone.
Because that's like what people are all into. Like, oh, you should do that.
Yeah, and I dig it. That's like the, what do you call it?
Have you ever gotten an email from somebody that's like you sign up for an email list and then you get an email, but it says it's from like the person, you go, oh, it's from so-and-so. But then it's just a mass email.
Yeah. Well, because sometimes it is from that person, but it is a mass email.
Okay.
But sometimes it's from like their marketing company
or
whatever.
I guess those are the ones that I go, come on, man.
Yeah, bro, I felt all good. But this one is good because this is actually from me.
Yeah.
So I'll try to make it look cool and official, with some cool pictures on there. But yes, it is coming from me.
I have friends.
Yes.
That, kind of have email lists, right?
Yeah, sure.
And I'm on their email list, but then I'm also we'll exchange personal emails, right? About whatever topic. And I'll get an email from, an email will show up and I go, oh, that's cool. It's so-and-so. And then I open it up and it's one of those things. I'm always like, oh, dude, that's a bummer.
Yeah. What do you mean? Like Sam Harris?
Just whoever.
Oh, yeah.
You name them.
I signed up for Sam Harris's email list, but it was happened to be at the same time where I sort of like met him and sort of like know him. And then I seen it like from Sam Harris. I was like, yes, Sam Harris is emailing me. And then it's like his podcasting. I was like, I felt that. It was cool. I signed up for a reason. So I was expecting, but that expectation that it's actually him emailing you, being like, hey, great to meet you or something like this, you know?
Yeah.
Kind of.
That's funny. No, I get, you know, quite a few friends like that. Where, and you know, I'm not a big communicator and I don't have a ton of friends anyways. So when I do get emails from my friends, it's always because I get a lot of business emails, obviously. But then when people email my personal email, you know, and I go, oh, and then I see that it's a form email, like, oh, well.
Maybe not quite as excited.
But sometimes it has spurred me to email them, right? I've gone, you know, and then they email me back and we have a cool something, you know, but it reminds me.
Yeah.
I say, what gave me that feeling like, oh, that's cool to hear from this person or that person. Maybe they were thinking the same thing. Yep. Why am I not emailing them? Who am I supposed to not take any initiative here?
Yep.
So then I'll take some initiative and say, hey, I listened to your last podcast, or hey, I saw you do that thing. And they go, oh, cool. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So it's a little indirect prompt to kind of relate to people.
Yeah, reach out, man.
Yeah.
Can't pick up a phone.
Yeah.
Shoot. It's true. All right, well, nonetheless, there you go. So yeah, jockostore.com, that's where all this stuff is. Also, if you want to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, I know it sounds kind of weird because you probably already are subscribed. Maybe not. I don't know.
I am. If
you're not, you, of course, yeah, me too, Jocko. But if you're not subscribed, you want to subscribe, boom, let me remind you that option is available for you.
We also have some other podcasts. We have a podcast formerly known as The Thread, which I was this close to renaming, and I didn't like it. And then I found the ultimate new name for it. And there's already another podcast which I can't even believe exists with this name that I can't believe has already been taken. So I'm still in the midst of finding out a new name for that.
Well, what was the name?
I'm not going to say it.
Why not?
Because I'm not going to say it.
You were so let down.
I was
not the
so
name.
disappointed. And also, I want to see if there's a way that I can still manipulate the name enough to use it.
Oh, right. Gotcha.
But I don't want to give it away. Grounded podcast where we talk about jiu-jitsu, which we talked about jiu-jitsu today a lot anyways. So, but we talk about it even more, and we talk about life, and we talk about everything else on the Grounded podcast. We got the Warrior Kid podcast for your warrior kids. We got Warrior Kid soap from IrishOaksRanch.com, a young warrior kid making soap so that everybody out there in the entire world can stay clean. We got a YouTube channel, which is where Echo takes videos and he puts them on there. Sometimes he puts modifications. I said last time that he should put enhancements into just the podcast. So when I talk about counterinsurgencies, when I talk about weapons, some things should happen in this. Yeah. You didn't do it. Whatever. Total lack of initiative, but it's all good. I'm sure there's someone out there that would love to modify these things.
Yeah. Well, you know. To me, the jury is still out whether or not that's a good idea. So, you know, I'm gonna think about it.
Why don't we test it? Why don't we see? Next time when we do this podcast, you know, you make your little notes. You make your little your little notes.
Yeah, I do.
You should be like, oh, when I talk about, there was this massive explosion, you could just make a little note that says 1 hour and 37 minutes explosion.
Yeah. Here's the thing. Jocko.
For somebody that freaking just puts explosions everywhere.
Yes, sir. Yeah, and I'm an explosion advocate as far as video goes, 100%. But here's the thing. Here's the thing with that. So let's say I put a cool machine gun sound, explosions, you know, whatever I put, whatever we put, and one single person on YouTube with one of those ghost accounts that, like, you know, no profile picture, one of those guys says that's corny. Bro, that's going to like devastate me, I think. Us.
Okay.
And we can't do it. That's an indicator.
Bro, you need to harden up. You need to toughen up. Also, we got psychological warfare, a bunch of me talking about your moments of weakness, little psychological hitters. We got Flipside Canvas, little visual hitters. Flipsidecanvas.com. Support Dakota Meyer while you're at it. We got a bunch of books. The Code, The Evaluation, The Protocols. Leadership Strategy and Tactics Field Manual. Way of the Warrior Kid 1, 2, and 3. Mikey and the Dragons. Discipline Equals Freedom Field Manual. Extreme Ownership and The Dichotomy of Leadership. Check out those books if you like what we talk about on here. Echelon Front, that's our leadership consultancy. I talked about it a couple times today. We solve problems through leadership. That's what we do. Go to echelonfront.com. And by the way, if you want me to come and speak to your company, don't go to a speaker's bureau and don't Google Jocko speaking. Just go to echelonfront.com. That's what we do. We have EF Online, which is revamped. Come and check it out. It's online courses. It's online, not just online courses. It's online interactive. If you want to talk to me, if you want to hang out with me in a Zoom meeting, get on to efonline.com and you will get to talk. I will be sitting there answering your question. Muster, our leadership seminar event gathering, Phoenix, Arizona, September 16th and 17th. We're doing it. Dallas, Texas, December 3rd and 4th. We're doing it. Every gig we've ever done has sold out. ExtremeOwnership.com if you want to come to that. And if you need leadership in your organization, go to EFOverwatch.com. We got military, prior service military personnel that understand the principles we talk about, and they're ready to come to work at your team. Also, AmericasMightyWarriors.org. Mama Lee, Mark Lee's mom, she's out there on the grind, helping in a multitude of different ways. Service members, active duty, their families, Gold Star families around the world. That's what she's doing. You can go to AmericasMightyWarriors.org to either get involved or just donate. And if you haven't had enough of my protracted discourse, or you need more of Echo's arbitrary tales, you can find us on the interwebs, on Twitter, on Instagram, and on Facebook. Echo is at Echo Charles. I am at Jocko Willink. And thanks to everyone out there in uniform right now trying to keep order from becoming chaos, and you're doing it voluntarily for us. And a massive thanks to police and law enforcement out there, firefighters, paramedics, EMTs, dispatchers, correctional officers, border patrol, Secret Service. You do some of the hardest work in the world. You don't make a ton of money. You do it with massive risk for yourselves, and you do it to keep us safe, and we thank you. And to everyone else out there, there are lots of insurgencies going on. Lots of insurgencies happening in your life, in your business, in your relationships, in your family, in yourself. And it's real easy just to say, hold the line. It's real easy. I say it all the time. But you got to remember all these complexities. You got to remember that more than just brute force, you have to use your mind. You can't just outmaneuver. You have to outthink. You have to give and you have to take. You have to think strategic and you have to play the long game. And it's not easy, but that's how you win. So go out there and get after it. And until next time, this is Echo and Jocko. Out.